going to try to tell a story that I heard about 10 or 15 years ago. I was driving late at night and listening to the radio, and it happened to be Halloween. Kind of the perfect setup to hear a ghost story, because that's what this amounts to. Before I get into this story, proceed with caution. It is a ghost story. There are some dark ideas. Yes, it gives me comfort. But what does that say about me? Anyway, proceed with caution. There are some themes. It is a ghost story. Existential dread. And such. I'm also playing with magnets, so you might hear some clicking noises. And what else? Oh, there is a theme that comes up in many different belief structures. That's not how I read it. I don't hold any belief structures whatsoever, but I can definitely see how this plays into existing belief structures. So yeah, I don't have belief structures. I only entertain possibilities. I have no beliefs. No. But I do like this story. It makes me feel better. I think the most important theme is legacy. So without further ado, I shall tell the story. A person has ceased to exist upon the living plane, and they find themselves in an elsewhere place. An elsewhere place that is clearly for waiting. This person finds themselves in this place, and this place is boring. This place is very obviously for waiting because it's full of other people who are waiting. Almost everybody there is waiting. It is clear that that is what's going on. So this story has three places. There's the land of the living, which we know exists because that's where our character has come from. There's the elsewhere place where our character is waiting. And then there is this other mystery because the people are waiting. What are they waiting for? Where are they waiting to go? We don't get to find out in this story. That is a mysterious elsewhere. Don't know. But there's three places. That's important. And then there's four categories of people. Our character notices this. Our character notices there's four categories of people. There are people who are in the elsewhere place for just a brief moment of time. They zip through, in and out. They go to the mysterious beyond, the elsewhere very quickly. Then there are people who are there for a medium amount of time. They're there for quite a while by the land of the living standards, but still not very long in the grand scheme of things. They are medium length of time people. And then they proceed on to the mysterious elsewhere. Then there's a third group. They are there for a very long period of time, very long indeed by the living standards. But they too eventually move on to the elsewhere. But this fourth category of people are people who are clearly not waiting at all. They are not waiting. No, they are settled. They know that they are not waiting, that this is their elsewhere. The elsewhere will not be calling for them. They are settled in this first elsewhere, and they are not happy about it. They are not waiting, they are settled, and they are unhappy. And over time, our character becomes curious. They talk to the people practically jogging through this elsewhere, and they find out that these people have no one on the living plane that says their name. Maybe they were the last people surviving in their family. Maybe they lived to be extremely old, and so they're just getting to sprint through this elsewhere. But that's what they find out. No one on the living plane is saying their name. Nope. They were the last ones. Or perhaps they just lived very solitary lives, perhaps any number of things. Perhaps things that are sad. Perhaps things that just mean that they lived a very long life and were the last ones. Then there are the medium people, the people who perhaps have large families, and for a generation or two, their names will get spoken. We find out this is what our character has. That is their situation, and it is what most people, it is the largest group of people are in this category. They are there for a generation or two, or maybe three. They have a medium amount of people. Sometimes this group of people, though, ends up being in the other category, the people who are there for potentially 10 generations, because what happens with them is they have a very strong gravestone. And so someone on the living plane comes upon their grave and says their name. And so these people who should be there for only 2 or 3 generations in this first elsewhere, they get all the way to the edge, are about to leave, and then someone on the living world says their name, and they are yanked back into this first elsewhere, and they don't get to find out what's in the elsewhere. Nope. They have to wait until their gravestone crumbles away. Eventually our main character becomes restless enough, curious enough, bored enough, courageous enough, something enough to go talk to the unwaiting, settled people. How can they be so sure? How can they know for certain? Why is it that they'd never even look up when everyone else is moving? When movement happens amongst the rest of the people, why do they not even look up? Why is it that they are so clearly not waiting when everyone else is? And our person goes and asks them. They become curious or bored or something. And what they learn is that the settled people, the unwaiting people, lived such large lives when they were amongst the living that they became beyond living in a way. It was like a price they paid, in a sense. They became eternal amongst the land of the living. Their names will always be relevant amongst the living, and so they are forever tied to the land of the living. Eventually, occasionally, sometimes, one of them gets lucky, and something happens that allows for a great forgetting, a great something to happen, where they are no longer very suddenly not relevant anymore, and they get to move on. They get to become small again. They get to sever that tie to the land of the living. Their legacy frees them, and they are very happy to find themselves waiting suddenly. Fewer and fewer people seem to know who they are, and they sense that something has shifted. They sense that maybe they will get to find out what the elsewhere is all about. In talking to the group of unwaiting people, our main character learns another detail about them, which is that amongst this group there is included the heroic and legendary, as well as the notorious and infamous, as well as ancient names that have really just become nothing but the name to the land of the living. People who are so ancient that their person, their humanity, is not connected really to their name at all, but their name still gets spoken, and so here they remain. And what a fate for them. A lot of implications to this story. I think about it all the time. That's kind of where it leaves off. So I suppose I will wrap up. Anyway, why did I even share it? I like it. I like warnings against questing for a legacy, because I feel like that's kind of a bit of a trap. And this story is that's what it is. This story is that the idea of legacy is a trap. It's a misguided thing. And a lot of the people who are doing great harm in the world right now are very concerned about their legacy. Anyway, perhaps this was interesting. Perhaps other people like ghost stories. It was a good ghost story, and it made my car ride 10 or 15 years ago much more interesting. Hope you're well, and this wasn't too dark and scary.